The Earley Show will begin after a brief word from today's sponsor, Answering Legal. Visit answeringlegal.com to learn more about our 24/7 virtual receptionist team.
I've been utilizing Answering Legal for my firm since 2015, and truth be told, it was a game changer for me. I can be anywhere, and I'm getting my phones answered by Answering Legal. A strategic partner, as I call Answering Legal, provides a great reward. What is that reward? It's time. Time for whatever I want to do. As a private practitioner, I would highly recommend Answering Legal to other private practitioners. Now, every call goes answered.
Welcome to another episode of the Earley Show. It's Chris Earley, and I am really pumped. We have a really special guest with us, Seth Price. Has joined the podcast today. Seth has a great story, uber successful entrepreneur in a few different spaces. So really excited to get into it with him. As always, get your pencil sharpened. I'm sure there'll be a lot of writer downers in this discussion. So it's going to be a lot of jam-packed value. So as always, as you know, this is sponsored by our friends at Answering Legal. They are kind enough to sponsor the Earley Show podcast. So Seth is someone I've known for a few years. I've crossed paths with him on the conference trail. He is a very prominent personal injury attorney in the DMV area, and I'm really excited to chop it up with him because he's a guy I have a lot of respect for. So Seth, thank you for joining us today.
Awesome to be here. Glad to be on the podcast.
Thank you. So, you are doing things in the PI vertical as well as the digital marketing vertical. So I do want to get into that with you. But if you could, share with us sort of your backstory, your upbringing, brothers and sisters. What was it like coming up as you were being raised?
I appreciate it. Part of me feels like I am the, when you hear all these talks, it's always like, I was battling this. I was impoverished. My dad left at an early age and I had no food. I had to forage for food. I got none of that. I grew up as an upper middle class New York kid. My dad was a lawyer. Mom stayed home, raised the kids, doing, having put her career on the side. Went to New York in the 70s, was kind of rough. While we were lucky enough to go to private school, which at the time was really, didn't seem like a big deal. Now raising kids, realize what a blessing that was. Applied to college at a time in the late 80s when you could still get to the top schools with like an okay academic background. Talked my way into UPenn. Had a great on-campus interview. Doesn't even exist anymore. Only alumni get on-campus interviews. Ended up having a great 4 years there. I'm somebody who, I never thought of myself as entrepreneurial, but like from an early age, reflecting back, when you hear about John Morgan saying a lot of kids had a paper route, and that was how you could tell who the badass entrepreneurs were of a generation. I didn't have a paper route because that was a professional thing. There was a company that delivered to Manhattan apartments, and that you weren't going to become a paper boy. There's no such thing in the city. That said, I was really into politics. And so in my early teens, I worked for a congressional campaign thinking I might get myself to Washington, D.C. I don't think I've ever told the story before. And, I did some volunteer work on the campaign. But at one point, they were having a battle where one of the local newspapers, one of the free, very free or inexpensive weekly newspapers in the neighborhood of the city, was bad-mouthing my candidate. And there was another newspaper, whether bought or unbought, that was endorsing my candidate. And so we need to make sure that the good newspaper was delivered to everybody in my area. And I grew up in an apartment complex on the east side of Manhattan called Peter Cooper Village, and Stuyvesant Town was the sister one. This was owned by MetLife. Little footnote, it was the largest commercial acquisition ever in the history of residential real estate, or real estate at the time. It was like a $5 billion acquisition. MetLife sold it. And then it was also the largest foreclosure that the model was that they were going to force people out and take rent stabilized rate to market rents. That did not end up happening. This is after I grew up. My parents are still there. But anyway, wild story on that. But suffice to say, there are 100 apartment buildings, 14 stories tall, approximately, with 8 people per floor. And they needed to make sure this newspaper was delivered to everybody's door in all of these buildings. And it's a little bit of a hustle. You had to get in the building. You had to know somebody to be buzzed in. It wasn't a doorman building. It was an intercom. But you could just walk in with somebody. And they said, hey, we want to make sure that 100 apartment buildings, 120 people per building, all got this newspaper. What are you going to do? And I said, okay, will you give me, I forget the number, $5,000 or $10,000 and the newspapers, and I'll figure it out. So they gave me a lump of money, and I hired neighborhood kids, like the kids, let's say I was 13, 14, I hired the 10 to 12-year-olds. This is before the helicopter parenting. So like 10 to 11, 10, 11, 12-year-olds could do this. And I paid them $3 an hour plus pizza lunch. And I remember sitting in my apartment. I sent them out. I gave them an apartment to go to. They would run up and down. They'd throw the newspapers. They'd come back, have their pizza, and do another one. And that was sort of my first foray into something entrepreneurial. So I laugh back, but my goal, having a lawyer dad, was not to practice law. I knew it wasn't what I was destined for. I'm not great with attention to detail. The ADHD is way too high. And so I love building stuff. And that was sort of how post law school ended up doing what I did.
Well, it's really interesting story because I feel like entrepreneurs don't just become entrepreneurs out of nowhere. There are signs in the upbringing, right? I did have a paper route, right? And so, but I hear in your story a hustle, a kind of just hustling, right? And that's, I think, worthy of a lot of respect because you kind of had to think outside the box at a really young age. It sounds like you were a budding entrepreneur at that young age. And make no mistake, New York was different. I grew up not far from the city. New York was a lot different in the 70s and 80s. It was a lot grittier, and so it's a lot prettier, if I may say, than it was back in the day. So I can appreciate, growing up in New York. That's an awesome upbringing. Just a very cosmopolitan experience. Very.
Look, you got used to, you were given mugging money as a kid. You had to be street savvy. I remember one time there were bad guys following me. I crossed the street. They were still following me. I pulled into my barber shop and hung out there until the guys left. It was like, and again, you got very street savvy, and it pains me. I live in the suburbs of DC now. My kids are like shuttled everywhere by minivan. And, I try to get them to meet me at games. We have Caps tickets now, and had to try to have them take the metro down just so they have some life experience. My son's now at boarding school. I try to get him not to be picked up, but take the metro back and figure out, just to show you how far I've fallen. My son and daughter went to a soccer game at Audi Field, and they came back, and I said, it's going to be crazy afterwards, big surge price on the Uber, take the metro. They got to the metro, they got on the metro, they got off the metro, and there is a free bus, a circulator that circulates from the metro station where we live and just does our downtown area. No charge, get on it. I timed it. It was on till 10. They got off the train, 9:45. Next thing I know, I get a phone call that they don't know where they are, and they've gotten off the bus. It turned out that my kid got on the bus because everybody was he didn't know there were different buses. The idea that there was a bus station, which he had never probably been to, and that there was one bus was a circulator bus and one bus was just going to Silver Spring from Bethesda. It didn't dawn on him that maybe because people were loading that bus that he was waiting for a different bus. It shows you I was on the subway at age 10 by myself with friends, and this guy at 16 can't get himself on a bus.
Yeah, the subway back in the day, we both know was no
joke. This is Bernie Getz era.
Bernie Getz is like 86 or mid 80s. Yeah, it was legit. It was not what it is today. So I can appreciate where you're coming from. But kudos to you for giving your kids, such a great.
I'm trying. I'm pushing them, but it's like I got a wife who's like, I'll pick. Why are you not getting them? Because if they don't learn this stuff, you can't teach grit. You can't teach hungry, as one of the books will tell us. I'm really trying to at least layer some grit in, because it is really tough from the suburbs where everything has been sugar coated and Teflon and bubble wrapped. It does scare me about the next generation.
I hear you about that. I'm with that 100%. So you and I have a lot in common. We both have scaled businesses, right? We both go to a lot of conferences. We both geek out. I would, I'll admit I'm a nerd about this stuff. I feel like you are too. And I say it in a very laudatory way. Like we are, we really dig into the minutia of scaling a practice. And so that we clearly have in common. And we both are hustlers. We talked about, when you were a young kid being an entrepreneur. I was an entrepreneur at a young age. approach, right? Just we both get after it. I think we both take big bets on ourselves. And so I always like to kind of, I'm always fascinated. So, you didn't just start with a large law practice. If I'm not mistaken, when you started your law business, I like to call it a business because that's what it is, your law business. You started it with your partner and an administrative assistant. Is that right or no?
Pretty much, so the story goes, I copped out. I went to law school because there were no jobs in 91, 92. The booming 80s was over. So I figured I'd hide out in law school for a few years. And then I come out and it wasn't that much better in like 94, 95. It was not great yet. And so I took a law firm job for a couple of years, but I looked up and by 98, things were booming. And I went to New York for the first .com bubble. Started a business in the music side, whole history with me and rap people because we couldn't get mainstream music to this is pre iTunes. Sadly, Napster brought that business down because free is better than anything I could do, and ended up being a founding employee in something called uslaw.com, which was WebMD money attempting to do what's now been done by LegalZoom, FindLaw, or Avvo. B2C lawyers online. And we were lawyers would hang up on you. Why would any lawyer be online? It was a crazy, crazy time. And, pretty much when the bubble burst, April of 2000, by January of 2001, everything was gone. Amazon, which was skying high, was down to $6 a share. Everything was, Google was left. Yahoo was left, but the 8 people doing pet food online, maybe one survived. It was pretty rough. And my law partner loves practicing law. It's a guy I went to UPenn with and GW Law. And I was like, we walked the franchise floor. I was like, I'm going to do anything but start a law firm. And he said, no, I really want to do it. I'm doing a bunch of pro bono stuff. He had been a public defender, burnt out. We did some real estate plays together and nothing was jamming. And we saw the writing on the wall in real estate as the 2000s went on. And he was like, look, I really like this. And I'm like, hey, our real estate's not doing great. We got to do something to make a living and pay off our real estate debts. So literally out of his basement, we divided and conquered. I would be marketing and operations. He would be legal. In fact, the very first iteration was the law office of David Benowitz. I'm like, nobody knows. I'm not the lawyer. We'll make it named after you. And we basically started in his basement. We got our first real office was an interior Regis office, maybe 110 square feet. And the admin that we had a 5-year felony record. He'd done time for some sort of drug deals and couldn't really type, which didn't make him a great admin, but it's the guy we had. And we outgrew that space within 2 weeks. It was crazy. We had hired 1 and then 2 law clerks, and one by one, they became attorneys. Like me, we were just like, okay, law clerk, no, we have too much work, go to work. And so we had sort of version 1 was a 3 attorney. We very quickly moved from our internal office to break the lease with Regis, which was no fun. I still remember that. And then ended up with an office in a row house across from the courthouse. Started with an office that we put the 3 lawyers in and myself on a couch. There were 3 little desks. And then as soon as the space outside our office came open, we had that. We kept grabbing offices till we had eventually a floor and then a second floor. And then we eventually had the whole building. And the guy was renting it to us by the office. And we realized, at this point, we could get a commercial lease, which ironically is now 10 years up now. And we are going through the renewal process. Whole nother story. We could touch on commercial real estate. Should we invest more in space? Shouldn't we? But that was sort of we started with 1 office, 3 desks and a couch. And I was given the couch since I didn't have a docket.
All right. So things, fast forward, things have worked out. But just back in the day, because it sounds like you started from scratch. I started from scratch. Things have worked out, fortunately for both of us. But what was your mindset like? Those days were dark, right? There's sleepless nights. What was that like for you?
I like a lot of things I'll break the stereotype on. They weren't, my darkness was the fact that I was trying to get money to bail out some tough real estate in the late 2000s. We were successful on criminal from moment one. And that's sort of so we built a cash flow with criminal and then pivoted into PI. And that's why we've always had good cash flow to build it. I probably haven't built PI as large as I could have because I'm conservative and I built that. But we do 8 figures in criminal alone DC, Maryland, Virginia, and South Carolina.
Wow. Okay. So cash flow, that's interesting because, obviously any PI lawyer listening to this knows that there is no cash flow. Cash flow is very variable.
No,
Right?
so I'm the wrong speaker if you're going to figure out how you're going to bootstrap this up. I didn't. We had cash flow, and then some lady brought me a case, and we had a paralegal who had some PI experience. And I still, it was the craziest case ever. It's at a homeless shelter in DC. The woman was about 5'3" and 400 pounds, the loveliest woman. And if you interviewed her, if we had a Zoom, and she was compelling and interesting. She was raising 4 kids, and somehow this was an old hospital or something. And she was taking the elevator from the bedroom places to the dining floor of this homeless shelter. And I don't know how, but ends up in a scuffle with a security guard who said, "You need your ID." And she didn't want to go back up to her room to get it. And next thing you know, they're rolling around on the floor with him throwing punches at somebody that I didn't realize was 8 months pregnant.
Oh my God.
Right. And it was a crazy case because, the kid was born. There was no outward signs that anything was wrong. And it was just crazy. And they offered $5,000, and I think I said, 15, and she was thrilled. This was, there were no medicals, no nothing. She put 10 in her pocket. I was like, oh, we could do this. And we then ended up staffing up. So we started with a criminal footprint and pivoted in. So I can't tell you the woes of no money, which again, I think probably drives you and turns you into a better business person. But we didn't have those sleepless nights. Mine came from upside down real estate.
Understood. Okay. Yeah. One of my first cases, there was an offer of $4,000. I called my mom. I said, "I can't believe it. I have an offer for this, and I was in a case." Like, it's funny how things change, and there's a really good book, Dan Sullivan, The Gap and the Gain. Sometimes we're always looking at, why aren't we at this point in our career? To look back at the path, I think is pretty important. I think a lot of people forget about. So, all right. So today, how many lawyers do you currently have?
About 43, 44. It is a mixture of PI, med mal with criminal, which is the largest numeric. Criminal is very lawyer intensive. So, ideally our PI is probably scaled at about a 3 or 4 to 1 staff to attorney, whereas the criminal is much different. And then we add anything I could market. If I was doing well digitally with family, I added family. If I had trust and estates. My dad's a trust and estates lawyer in New York. He's 88 and still practicing.
Oh my God, that's awesome.
Yale class of 59 law school. Okay. And so in order to sort of spend more time with him, I went and, basically opened that division. And like, as in the B2C, just talking a little bit from the digital side, I have BluShark now. I've seen sort of the layers of difficulty. PI, you have a lot of people competing in TV, billboards, everything, right? So digital is very competitive. Criminal doesn't really have TV or billboards in most markets.
Right.
Most markets, it's really, really good for search because somebody gets into a DUI, they don't want to tell their general counsel, they do a search directly. Things like family and immigration are half search and half your friends. And then trust and estates is probably 90% referrals and only 10% internet, but so few people do spend time on the internet and money on. So few lawyers spend money on the internet that you can do a lot of damage with a lot less resources. And it's sort of for me, I put a website up. If you type for the longest time, you typed in DC Trust and Estates lawyer, and literally we had a 1-pack instead of a 3-pack with 3 or 4 people on it. We were the picture of our trust and estates lawyer was front and center. It was crazy. And just, there are things you could do there that I could never do in Boston for personal injury.
Yeah, for sure. So I see you on the conference trail quite a bit, like I said. So you're obviously, you're getting on airplanes a lot, right? Like myself. And I asked you this in Nashville, Derek Isaac's conference. I know the answer, but I want the audience to hear. If you could go to one conference a year, that's it, all you get. You did one conference. Which would it be and why?
Look, there's different ones for different things. And so this is not doing it justice, but I would say overall breadth. The National Trial Lawyers Conference is pretty amazing. I've made a home there. I help run the digital day. So they've listened to me, and they have a very specific digital marketing boot camp on the afternoon of the first day. And I really enjoyed the mentorship I've gotten from people like Keith Givens, Andrew Finkelstein back in the day I met there, and everybody seems there, and everything else is a subset of that. There are some amazing people out there. The Fireproof Group is incredible with what they do and how they put a practice in a box. Chad Dudley is as smart as they get. Daryl Isaac's conference has brought together really interesting people, from a business sense, and a lot of the big TV advertisers. So there are all different ones. But for me, if you pick one, NTL for 3 days, Miami, right time of year as you're gearing up, that has been like a home base. And then I've launched from there to other things.
And our friend Ken Hardison is integral with that.
I should, again, Pilma. I built a law firm and a marketing agency out of there. It's more boutique and for the right people. And he has a herd. If you're a PI lawyer looking to scale and sort of like trying to figure out what's possible, I feel that that's an amazing. Ken has been a friend and mentor. That's why, I am very blessed to have all of these different places. And so to say, I like many things, it's a loaded question, because to a certain extent, for me, I have that as a piece. But that what I would say is, if somebody's coming to me and saying, hey, I'm just building out my PI practice, Pilma might be the ultimate place. If somebody says, I already have 5 offices and I want to sort of figure out who the players are around the country, NTL is really, really helpful. If somebody's like, look, I got the business, the phone's ringing, but I need to figure out how to maximize my case values, having a Chad Dudley and what he has done is really remarkable, because he speaks to that. So, and to be fair, the reason why the Pilmas and the NTLs are valuable is because Chad speaks at NTLs along with Mickey Love. And so you could sort of like get pieces of it and figure out who resonates for you, and then follow those people to, it's almost like going to a music festival, seeing who you like, and then figuring out who you want to catch on tour.
Yeah. Our friend Ken Hardison asked me to speak in Miami. I'm really excited for that in January 18th. We'll be talking about grassroots marketing and how to really deal with the 800-pound gorillas in your given market. So super grateful to Ken. He's been great for my career. He's just a good dude. I really appreciate Ken.
I've been going since just realized the other day, I think since like 2012.
Oh wow!
Missed one along the way.
And Mike Tyson was there last year, so that was interesting.
That was NTL, no?
Yeah, NTL Miami. Yeah,
NTL Miami. Yes, after the Ken Hardison morning.
Correct. Yeah. But just great value, right? Miami's not far, just great value.
Well, look, that's sort of like, and so look, when I say that, that's why NTL, you get a whole half day with Ken Hardison thrown in. You
100%.
know what I mean? Like, it's crazy. You get, I get to do get the best speakers on digital marketing in the afternoon, and then you get some of these monsters who have done incredible. What I love about look, Pilma environment, very, very welcoming. NTL as well. It's where people like Ken Hardison are just walking around, and you get time with them. And it's like at his own conference, he's accessible. But here, some of the glitterati people, when I started with nothing and I showed up to like the first NTL, people who are like already mega successful totally took time to sit down. And look, that was, to be fair, my very first Pilma. Met somebody like a Rick Harris out of Vegas. Amazing business lawyer. Yep. And just very, very giving with his time. I literally spent an hour and a half with his then girlfriend and him, and he was just sort of shooting the shit on lessons learned. And it was, just invaluable as far as my professional growth.
So I know that you're running, you're running a law firm, Price Benowitz, and you also have BluShark, right? Digital marketing. So, and I understand you take a show on the road because you want to get on the conference trail, right? So you are, I look at you as a guy who's very social, comfortable in his own skin. You're shaking hands. You're in the lobby. You're a forever learner. What's your mindset when you go to a conference? What is your objective?
I feel blessed because I can double dip. I just was telling the story the other day, in that I started going to conferences, and I was asked to speak at the Atlas conference, very small, sort of like Pilma-esque conference, run by Munley out of Scranton. And he just does it every few years for shits and giggles. And in talking there, I realized I spoke at his conferences twice when BluShark didn't even exist. Because A, you go for free, and B, the best networking is generally done between the speakers. And so I was like, wow, this is awesome. And it wasn't for a number of years. It was 5 years later when I look, hey, everybody else who's speaking has some widget they're selling. What's my widget? And I coincidentally spun BluShark out of Price Benowitz, partially because I want to give opportunity to our in-house marketing team. I said, hey, we did it for ourselves. Let's do it for others. And one of the things that I found sort of fascinating and rewarding was that it allowed me, and the reason you see me at more conferences, I can double justify it. I'm learning stuff for the law firm, and I'm learning, I'm meeting people that might be appropriate for BluShark. And as you know, as you scale, and SEO in particular is so labor intensive, that one of the advantages, you can do a lot of cold outreach and speak to people, but as you find people that are true partners, I wish that it was more of a widget and anybody could fit in. But if somebody's a real a-hole, which there are plenty of in the law space, it takes such a hit on the employees that I basically had a proclamation at work which says, hey, if somebody's too much of I'll be the a-hole, but if anybody else is treating you badly, that can't stand. And it sucks because some of these people are $100,000 plus contracts annually. And it's like, no, they can't be there if they're going to treat you badly, because I can't lose you. We don't lose our top people. And so by going there and sort of meeting people, it sort of weeds some of that out. If you get to know people, now I'm fooled all the time. Somebody's great to me and they're like awful to staff. That happens. But when you find people that really are synergistic partners that look at you as the outsourced marketing arm, those people have really good runs. The employees dig it. And so to me, there are a lot of ways to acquire clients, but I love the fact that when I'm meeting people, I figure out what's right. The first time I met you, I said, this guy isn't even ready for what we're doing. And there are people that I'll tell like, hey, this isn't right for you, or wait for this, or I can tell you, you're in quicksand, like that's not a stable place to then build out a plan. And that when stuff is stable, that you make money with time and focus. Like when a person's jumping jobs, it's not going to do you any good. They're going to leave in a minute, but you make money having a plan, having people execute it, and then carrying that out over time in a systematic way. So I love the fact that at these conferences, not only do I learn, not only do I potentially do business development for BluShark, but I also have that general networking. You never know where it's coming back. And at this point, it's amazing. In the last week, the number of referrals into the firm where people are like, you're my guy, DC, Maryland, Virginia. It just happens. It's trusted. And, less so, but I used to get much more of this, which is like, hey, who's the guy in Albuquerque? And so you become that middle person. Not that you're making even a buck from it, but I love that socialization and that web that we've created. And you see just as well at the conferences.
Well, I think it's like a flywheel. Business generally, a flywheel effect, right? You're compounding your investment into yourself, your efforts, just keeps growing. So you and I broke bread in DC. I got to meet your lovely wife, Jody. We were at John Fisher's mastermind in DC. Love John Fisher. Anyone listening to this who has not been to a John Fisher mastermind, you got to get on. You got to get to the next one.
Especially because next year we're going to Sicily.
Yes. Well, what's even better for me, Boston is next year. I'm pretty pumped about that. I don't have to get on an airplane, Seth. My wife is happy about that. And I'm happy. So, but we broke bread and it was a nice dinner. But that day I was in a mastermind session with you, and not to get too much in the weeds, but you said something about my business. And I was like, I took offense. I was like, I didn't let you know that I took offense. But that comment changed. And I've said this publicly before. That comment was percipient. It was very wise, but it changed my practice significantly. So I'm a big believer in the mastermind effect. I know you are too. That mastermind in particular was very, very, it catapulted me, right? Some more than others, but that one really catapulted me. What do you find from masterminds? Like, why do you keep going back and doing masterminds?
And I think it's because you don't know what you're going to get.
Yeah.
And like I go to some where I'm like sort of one of the larger firms. I go to some where I'm one of the smaller firms.
Sure.
And every time I get on the plane, I'm like, why am I doing this? And every time I come back, it is rare that I think once that I came back and said, hey, this wasn't justified, that I got great stuff out of it. And you know what? Some of it isn't even, new things. It's solidifying what to do, how to prioritize. I was with Michael McCready at one recently. And it was a humbling thing, sort of your story, where I said something and it just changed the way he thought about it. And he like went back and he's like, this is it. I think most of us have a lot of the answers inside of us, and it's figuring out like basically cathartically almost, and using the people in the room. There are times when somebody's like, hey, that's really stupid. Not that you want to like shoot somebody down. That's not the point of a mastermind. But it's seeing these people reflecting, crowdsourcing what you're doing and having ideas crystallize. One of the biggest benefits is you get out of the office and you think about working on your business, not in your business. That is a huge deal. And secondly, it's people with different perspectives. And like most things, so much easier to give advice than to take it. I say it all the time. I literally probably prefaced when I gave you that tough advice. Easier advice to give than to take, but I see it this way. And, there are times when, I know that it is the outside perspectives. And it's interesting because there are two types of masterminds. I'll digress for a minute, and each have a purpose. One where you bring an issue or problem, and the other where you bring your best practice and share that with the group.
Yep.
And I think there's value in both.
Sure.
Both have value, and that if you do one exclusively, it sort of gets old and tired, especially for the same people. Because there's some people that are really good at social, or really good at review generation, really good at processes of managing cases. But like it's over time. And so one of the things that Fisher I love about is that it's always different. It's a different crowd with a core group, and so that energy and excitement really I just love.
That's different. You don't find that variable, the flux, which I like. People are in and out, and I like that. Some hardcore people go to most, but for the most part, it's different people and in the seats at each one. Just pivoting for a second, what's your greatest success in life so far?
Oh, I don't know. That's a loaded question because, there are times when you're like, oh my God, this isn't right. The law firm could have this many more cases in PI, and I could have expanded this at BluShark or what have you. I would say that I've been able to do this. Married, 3 kids, employ, probably 200 full-time people and 400 with contractors. And I can't think about it too much, but the fact that 400 people wake up every morning and make their living based on shit that's emanated from me, that's a little humbling and scary.
Crazy.
So the fact that I've been able to scale this and stay afloat, objectively, if you speak to my family, they probably spend a little bit too much time on the road, but I kind of feel like I feel like it's been a good balance that has allowed me to stay engaged, hopefully went home engaged and went on the road engaged. So I think the greatest success has been the fact that I've balanced had this juggling act. And at the same time, I think, balancing what is the cost of it and being cognizant of that.
That balance is hard, and I hear you on that. All right, I want to be respectful of your time. Just want to wrap up, but I do want to ask you, which space is more competitive in your eyes, the PI/criminal or the digital marketing space? Which is tougher for you?
To me, they're interchanged, meaning it's like in one. I'll answer in 3 parts. I feel like cracking the code is strong, but we have a very, very good business model for criminal. There are not many people that have scaled it. My partner came with a super knowledge in the space, which helped just lay it. I've done I think a good job of operating that at scale. PI is tough. There's no sugarcoating it. It's humbling every day. Not that criminal isn't, but that PI has gotten more and more competitive, and that it is the managing and scaling of people is not for the faint of heart. History is written by the victor. I put my flag down in markets that aren't great with contrib. I always think, what if I'd been in Florida or Georgia or California, one of these amazing jurisdictions? There's that. And then digital, I feel blessed that we've been able to help so many people, many that are clients, many that aren't clients. I just enjoy it. As you see, I take pleasure in learning about it. It's what built the law firm. So, it is, I can't tell you what's more challenging. I think I like maybe the ADHD in me loves the fact that when, it's great and it's painful, but that you can work on something and then something else on fire and you can fix that. And then so the diversity is what I've loved.
Awesome. For our audience, is there a particular book you've read that had a big impact on your life, either personally or professionally?
I think that the early reads of the E-Myth were sort of
Mm,
eye-opening.
I hear you.
Just like, hey, can you work? I mean, there are plenty of great books out there, no shortage. We run Traction at our both companies, both law firm and company. But like the idea that if you can elevate yourself so you're not working in the business, if you're not that tactician, that's like, and I've done that, and I am, I feel like it's taken me a long time where I am now really getting myself to 80% out of like only 20% left of management and trying to push north into the entrepreneurial space. And to a certain extent, I think traction with the fact that there's a place for somebody who's not in the business, that it's labeled, that has been a big sort of reinforcing piece.
And those two books, I'd highly suggest everybody to read them. I read them a few times actually. Um, as you wrap up, I want to ask you. I know, obviously, you go to these conferences, you're having these discussions in the hallways. What do the legal space is changing. Non-lawyer ownership is sweeping the nation. A lot of lawyers don't even know that yet, Seth, right? Which I find troubling, but it changes afoot. Where do you see the profession, say 10, 15 years? If you look in your crystal ball, what does it look like to you?
I think I'll quote Andrew Finkelstein. In the pizza business, right? There's Papa John's and there's Domino's. They're big national brands. We see Morgan really turning that in. I'm sure there'll be another one following. And then there are plenty of local pizza places that do really, really well. There are people
Hmm.
that want Papa John's and they want Domino's. More sadly, my kids want it more than I wish. But there are plenty of people that won't eat from there that have their local pizza place that may have 6 to 8 locations in the region. And to me, I think that's probably the future, that there will be dominant national players with private money running it as a business and that have brands nationally. And then there's going to be regional players that are known that you have in Boston that we don't have here.
How can the smaller guys and gals thrive in the face of such competition? You think? How can
I
they?
think it's differentiating yourself, local brand, and making sure that you have the roots in the community. That is something that's going to be harder to scale. It is definitely scary, but I've seen somewhat of the Morgan effect, that as he enters markets, it gets more people understanding they need a PI lawyer, and while he takes plenty of cases, there are plenty more out there.
I believe abundance is plenty of work for everyone. Seth, thank you so very much for being on the show. Really appreciate it. How can people get in touch with you?
Hey, I'm pretty ubiquitous. Find me at a conference, hit me on Facebook. I'll tell you, the Facebook Messenger, if you're a Facebook person, is an amazing way. To me, Facebook Messenger is equivalent to email when it first came out, where you could email the CEO of Ford, he'd get back to you. People get emails from their friends. They're excited when they get a Facebook Messenger. Not everybody's on it, but if they are, so like anyway, just Google me, find me, very accessible. Call, text, email. But the point is, it's amazing. I tell my own employees, hey, anybody has speak at a conference, here's my cell phone. The number of people that take advantage of it is shockingly little. And I have found upstream, when I look at my mentors, half the reason I have them, the reason I'm friends with Morgan is I sat in I emailed him, said I was going to be in town, and sat in his waiting room until he took a meeting. This was 15 years ago. I think it's about not what widget you have to sell, but who are the connections and how are you going to get to the next level?
Yeah, I think successful people are givers, they're generous. So I encourage everyone, reach out to Seth. He's a reservoir of knowledge. He knows what's going on in the industry. Really grateful, Seth. Thanks for being on the show. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. It was a great time.
That's it for this episode of The Early Show. Be sure to check out more episodes of the show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, the Answering Legal YouTube channel.